I'm Isaac, 36, and I built my tech company from nothing, while my parents poured everything into my twin brothers. Despite years of favoritism, I still hoped things could change. When they invited me to dinner last month, after barely speaking for years, I thought maybe they finally saw me. Instead, they delivered news that would forever change our family. Dad's announcement about their will was just the beginning of a storm none of us saw coming. Before I tell you how my world turned upside down at that dinner table, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what happened 3 weeks later. I grew up in a brick colonial in suburban Boston, the kind of neighborhood where kids rode bikes until streetlights came on. My childhood wasn't terrible by any means. We had food on the table, vacations to Cape Cod every summer, and Christmas mornings with presents under the tree. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family, but appearances can be deceiving. When I was 4, my mother gave birth to identical twin boys, Garrett and Graham. I still remember the day they came home from the hospital wrapped in matching blue blankets. Everyone made such a fuss about them. Neighbors brought casseroles for weeks. Relatives I'd never seen before showed up bearing gifts. I was excited about being a big brother, imagining teaching them to play catch and build forts. My father, Raymond, ran a successful construction business that specialized in commercial buildings. He worked long hours, but always made time for the twins. My mother, Eleanor, had been a kindergarten teacher before becoming a full-time homemaker after the twins were born. They were comfortable financially. Not wealthy, but we never worried about money. The differential treatment started small. The twins got new outfits while I wore cousins' hand-me-downs. When I asked for a bicycle for my 7th birthday, Dad said money was tight that month. 2 weeks later, the twins got matching bikes for no special occasion. Mom said they were growing boy specials at the store. I learned to stop asking for things. School became my refuge. I excelled in math and science, joining the robotics club in middle school. We made it to the state championship my 8th grade year. My project on automated sorting systems won first place. My parents didn't attend. They were at Graham and Garrett's soccer tournament in Connecticut. When I showed them my trophy that evening, Mom said, "That's nice, honey," before turning back to the twins' soccer photos. The pattern continued through high school. I maintained a 4.0 GPA, became president of the computer science club, and earned a partial scholarship to MIT. The night I got my acceptance letter, I raced home bursting with pride. The house was empty, except for a note, saying they'd taken the twins to celebrate their junior varsity basketball championship. I ate dinner alone, and went to bed before they returned. By 15, I was working part-time at a local computer repair shop to buy my own clothes, electronics, and save for college. I learned to code by fixing customers' software problems. The store owner, Mr. Willis, became more of a mentor to me than my father ever was. He taught me about business, customer service, and the emerging tech industry. Those lessons would prove invaluable later. When college time came, my parents made their priorities crystal clear. "We've been saving for the boys' education," Dad explained as we sat at the kitchen table, reviewing my financial aid package. "We can give you $5,000 per year, but you'll need loans for the rest. The twins will need full rides, since there's 2 of them." I nodded, already expecting this. The twins were average students at best, but they were athletic and popular. I knew they'd probably attend state schools on partial sports scholarships, while I'd been accepted to one of the top engineering programs in the country. Those 4 years at MIT were grueling. I worked 20 hours weekly at the campus IT department while carrying a full course load. Holidays at home became increasingly uncomfortable, as the twins dominated every conversation with stories about fraternity parties and sports achievements. My internships at tech startups warranted barely a passing mention. I graduated with honors in computer science with $87 zero-inch student loan debt and a determination to succeed that burned like fire. My parents and brothers attended graduation, but left immediately after to get back for the twins' weekend baseball tournament. That was the moment I decided to create distance. The next 10 years were all about building my company. I started in my studio apartment with just a laptop and an idea for enterprise security software. The first 3 years I lived on ramen and coffee, coding 18 hours a day. I failed repeatedly, rebuilt, pivoted, and pushed forward. No safety net, no family backing, just pure determination. Today, my company employs 78 people, and was recently valued at $40 million. Last year, I finally paid off my student loans and bought a downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Financial security came from my own sweat and ingenuity, not family privilege. Contact with my family dwindled to obligatory holiday calls and occasional emails. I sent gifts for birthdays and Christmas, but rarely received acknowledgement. I made peace with the reality of our relationship, or so I thought. The call from my mother came on a Tuesday afternoon, as I was reviewing quarterly projections with my executive team. I almost didn't answer. When I did, her voice sounded unusually warm. "Isaac, dear, we haven't seen you in ages. Your father and I were hoping you could come for dinner this Saturday. There's something important we want to discuss with the whole family." Curiosity got the better of me. "Who's coming?" "Just you and your brothers and their wives. A small family gathering." A cautious hope flickered inside me. Maybe they'd finally recognize my achievements. Maybe age had given them perspective on how they'd treated me. Maybe we could rebuild something resembling a normal family relationship. "I'll bring wine," I offered already, planning to pick up an expensive bottle from my collection. "That would be lovely," Mom replied, sounding genuinely pleased. As I drove to their house that Saturday evening, memories flooded back. The street looked smaller than I remembered. The maple tree I'd climbed as a kid had grown massive. Their house, once the largest on the block, now seemed modest compared to some of the newer constructions. I parked my Tesla behind my brother's matching SUVs and grabbed the bottle of Chateau Margaux. I'd brought a $2,000 peace offering they wouldn't appreciate, but might impress their neighbors. Taking a deep breath, I walked up the familiar brick path to the front door, completely unprepared for what waited inside. The house smelled like roast beef and apple pie, a combination that instantly transported me back to Sunday dinners from my childhood. Mom had clearly gone all out preparing all my favorites. The dining room table was set with the good china crystal glasses sparkling under the chandelier. "Isaac," Mom exclaimed, embracing me with unusual enthusiasm. "You look so handsome. Have you lost weight?" Dad clapped me on the shoulder, his handshake firmer than necessary. The big-shot businessman graces us with his presence. "How's the tech world treating you, son?" Their attentiveness felt strange after years of indifference. I glanced around, taking in the familiar surroundings. Family photos lined the walls, mostly featuring the twins at various ages. I spotted myself in a few group shots, always standing slightly apart. Garrett and Graham arrived minutes later with their wives, Sarah and Jessica. At 32, they still looked remarkably identical: athletic builds, square jaws, and the confident posture of men who'd always been told they were special. Their wives were similarly blonde and polished, wearing nearly identical cocktail dresses and tennis bracelets. "The prodigal brother returns," Garrett joked, punching my arm like we were teenagers. Graham added, "Nice car out front. Business must be booming." Dinner conversation remained superficial. Weather, neighborhood gossip, and reminiscing about shared childhood memories, mostly involving the twins' exploits. Mom kept refilling my wine glass, while Dad peppered me with questions about my company. "So what's the actual value?" Now I heard tech companies are worth multiples of their revenue. Dad leaned forward, unusually interested. "You planning to go public anytime soon?" Graham asked between bites of potato. "You must have quite the retirement account started," Mom added with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I deflected most questions, uncomfortable with their sudden interest in my finances. After dessert, individual apple pies with vanilla ice cream, Dad suggested we move to the living room for after-dinner drinks. Once everyone was settled with brandies and coffees, Dad cleared his throat. The room fell silent. He exchanged a meaningful glance with Mom, who nodded slightly. "Isaac, boys," he began, voice taking on the formal tone he used for important announcements. "Your mother and I have been doing some estate planning recently. At our age, it's important to have everything in order." I nodded, wondering why this required my presence. A simple email could have outlined their plans. "We've updated our will," he continued, swirling brandy in his glass. "After much consideration, we've decided that our estate, the house savings investments, and my business will be divided equally between Garrett and Graham." The room went silent. I felt all eyes on me, gauging my reaction. I kept my expression neutral, despite the punch to the gut. "You won't get a single cent," Isaac, Mom, added, her voice gentle but firm. "We hope you understand." Dad leaned forward, apparently prepared for this speech. "You've done very well for yourself. Your brothers need the help more than you do. It's about equalizing things in the end." The pieces clicked into place. The unusual invitation, the probing questions about my finances, the elaborate dinner. This wasn't a reconciliation, it was a business meeting. "May I ask why the twins need financial help?" I kept my voice level, genuinely curious. Uncomfortable glances shot around the room. Graham studied his brandy while Garrett suddenly found the carpet fascinating. Well, Dad hesitated. "Garrett's restaurant venture didn't work out as planned. We had to help with some of the debt." Mom jumped in. "And Graham has had some investment challenges. The boys have families to support." "Investment challenges," I repeated. "Fine," Graham snapped. "I lost some money gambling, but I'm getting help." "Some money?" Garrett scoffed. "Try 200,000. Dad had to remortgage his business property to cover it." The truth unfolded like a bad movie. The twins had spent their adult lives failing at businesses, accumulating debt, and relying on our parents to bail them out. Meanwhile, I'd built something from nothing, taken no handouts, and was now being officially written out of the will because I'd succeeded. A calm clarity washed over me. "I understand completely," I said, setting down my glass. My family looked relieved until I continued. "Then don't expect a single cent from me either." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face paled. "What do you mean?" Dad asked, voice suddenly uncertain. "I mean that for the past 3 years I've been making your mortgage payments. I set up an automatic transfer when I found out you were struggling. I also paid for Mom's knee surgery last year and your anniversary cruise. All anonymously because I didn't want you to feel like charity cases." Their shocked expressions confirmed they had no idea. I'd arranged everything through their bank, never mentioning it, because I knew their pride would make acceptance difficult. "That's ridiculous," Dad sputtered. "We would have known." "Call your bank. Ask about the account that's been supplementing your mortgage payments since 2021, the one that transferred $4,200 last month." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Isaac, we didn't know." "Clearly," I replied, standing up. "And now you won't have to worry about it anymore. I'll stop all payments immediately." I walked toward the door, ignoring their calls to come back and talk. Garrett and Graham remained silent, staring at their drinks. Their wives looked uncomfortable, clearly witnessing a side of this family they hadn't seen before. As I reached for the doorknob, Dad called out, "Son, wait. We need to discuss this." I turned back one last time. "There's nothing to discuss. You've made your decision about family obligations. I've made mine. Goodbye." The drive home passed in a blur. I'd known my parents favored the twins my entire life, but this formal declaration still cut deep. Not because of the money, I had plenty, but because it confirmed what I'd always suspected in their eyes: I would never truly be equal to my brothers. The adrenaline kept me functioning until I reached my condo. Once inside, with the door locked behind me, everything crashed down at once. I sank onto my designer sofa, still wearing my coat, and stared at the city lights blinking beyond my windows. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had everything money could buy: the successful company, the luxury apartment, the financial security. Yet tonight had proven how little I had of what mattered most. My phone buzzed repeatedly, with calls from my parents, which I ignored. Around midnight, I called Michael, my best friend since college, and the only person who truly understood my family dynamics. They did what Michael's voice rose in disbelief as I recounted the evening's events. Officially wrote me out of the will. Mom actually said, "Not a single cent," like she was reading from a script. Michael's disgust was palpable through the phone. "After everything you've done for them, man, that's cold." Though, I'm not surprised. You know what your mom told my mom at the neighborhood barbecue last summer? She was bragging about their successful son in the tech industry and how you were following in Raymond's entrepreneurial footsteps. "They take credit for your success, but don't want to treat you equally." His words hit hard. They'd been using my achievements in their social circle while simultaneously planning to exclude me from their legacy. "What are you going to do?" Michael asked. Exactly what I told them. Cut off all financial support. I've been subsidizing their lifestyle for years, while they've been planning to leave everything to the twins. After hanging up, I opened my banking app. Sure enough, there was a pending automatic transfer to my parents' account scheduled for the following Monday. I canceled it, then navigated to the joint account I'd set up years ago for emergencies. The balance should have been around $60,000. It was empty. The transaction history showed a withdrawal of the entire amount 2 days after our dinner invitation. They'd cleaned out the account before dropping their bombshell announcement. They knew exactly what they were doing. I closed the account immediately and emailed my financial advisor to review any other potential entanglements with my family's finances. Then I drafted a brief factual email to my parents. I have canceled all automatic payments to your accounts. The joint emergency fund has already been emptied by you. Please do not contact me regarding financial matters going forward. The next week passed in a fog of emotional processing. I'd cycle through anger, hurt, resignation, and back to anger. Work provided some distraction, but my staff noticed something was off. My assistant Jenna started rescheduling non-essential meetings. My executive team picked up slack without asking questions. After 3 days of minimal sleep and maximum coffee, my business partner Wesley cornered me in my office. "You look like hell," he said bluntly, closing the door behind him. "What's going on?" I rarely discuss personal matters at work, but Wesley and I had built this company together from scratch. He deserved honesty. As I outlined the situation, his expression darkened. "Take some time off," he insisted when I finished. "A week minimum. I'll handle things here." "I'm fine," I protested automatically. "You're not, and that's okay." Wesley leaned forward. "Look, my father didn't speak to me for 6 years after I came out. I know something about family rejection. It's not something you just power through." He was right. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Winters, a therapist I'd seen briefly after a stressful acquisition 2 years earlier. She helped me process the dinner events and put them in context of my lifelong dynamic with my parents. "What you're describing is a pattern of emotional neglect and differential treatment," Dr. Winters explained during our session. "The will announcement was just a formalization of something you've experienced your entire life." "So why does it hurt so much?" I asked, embarrassed by the crack in my voice. "Because deep down we never stop hoping our parents will see us, value us, and love us equally. That hope doesn't fade easily, even with evidence to the contrary." She suggested implementing a no-contact period to establish boundaries and process my emotions without additional triggers. Though difficult, I agreed it was necessary. With professional guidance and distance from the situation, I began reviewing my financial support to my parents over the years. The mortgage payments alone totaled over $150,000. Add in medical bills, property taxes, insurance premiums, and various loans that were never repaid, and the total exceeded $300,000 over 5 years. The number shocked me. Not because I couldn't afford it, I could, but because I realized how one-sided our relationship had become. I'd been trying to buy their approval while they'd been planning to exclude me from their legacy. One evening, reviewing old family photos I'd kept in a box, I had a moment of clarity. My parents didn't see me as their son who needed love and support. They saw me as a bank account with unlimited funds to bail out their favored children. The realization was both devastating and liberating. By the end of the week, I'd made significant progress emotionally. I'd accepted the reality of my family dynamic without letting it define my self-worth. I returned to work with renewed focus, determined not to let my parents' actions derail the company I'd built or the life I'd created for myself. Then the twins showed up at my office. I was reviewing contract proposals when my assistant buzzed the intercom. "Your brothers are here. They don't have an appointment, but insist it's urgent family business." For a moment I considered sending them away, but curiosity won out. "Send them in." Garrett and Graham entered, looking uncomfortable in my sleek corporate environment. Without their wives or parents, as buffers they seemed smaller, somehow less confident than at dinner 10 days earlier. "Nice place," Graham commented, glancing around at the floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furnishings. "What do you want?" I asked, remaining seated behind my desk. The twins exchanged glances, a silent communication they'd perfected since childhood. Garrett spoke first. Look, things got weird at dinner. We wanted to explain some stuff. Mom and Dad aren't great at communicating, especially about money. I leaned back in my chair. I think they communicated their intentions quite clearly. You don't understand how bad things really are. Graham interjected, perching awkwardly on the edge of a visitor chair. Dad's business has been struggling for years. They remortgaged the house twice. To bail you out, I pointed out. Garrett had the decency to look ashamed. Partly yes. My restaurant failed spectacularly. I lost our initial investment plus about $70,000 in operating costs. Dad covered it. And my gambling problem, Graham admitted reluctantly. It started with sports betting in college, spiraled from there. I'm $200,000 in the hole. Been doing Gamblers Anonymous for 6 months now, but the damage is done. This explained some things, but raised more questions. Why are you telling me this? The twins exchanged another look. Mom and Dad are broke, Garrett said bluntly. Dad's construction business is barely staying afloat. They've been using their retirement fund to cover expenses. That's gone now, too. They expected you to keep helping them, Graham added. That joint account you set up, they used that money to prevent foreclosure on their house. The pieces clicked into place. My parents hadn't invited me to dinner to reconnect, or even just to inform me about the will. They'd been laying groundwork to ensure I'd continue financially supporting them, while officially excluding me from inheritance. So you're here because they sent you to smooth things over, I asked, anger rising, to make sure their safety net stays intact. Family helps family, Graham said, as if reciting a mantra he'd heard repeatedly. That's what they always taught us. Funny how that principle only works in one direction in our family, I replied. Where was family helps family when I was working through college, or building my business while living on ramen, or dealing with the emotional fallout of being treated as less important my entire life? Garrett shifted uncomfortably. We were younger. We needed more attention. You were 4 years younger, not infants. And you're adults now still taking and never giving back. That's not fair, Graham protested. We had different opportunities. Yes, you did. You had every advantage, every door open for you. And what did you do with those opportunities? You squandered them, then expected bailouts. The conversation devolved from there. Graham accused me of being selfish for having money and not sharing it freely. Garrett mentioned our parents' advancing age and potential future medical needs, implying I'd be responsible. When I remained firm about my boundaries, Graham's face reddened with anger. You've always thought you were better than us, he spat. Just because you got good grades and made some money. I never thought I was better than you, I replied calmly. I just wanted to be treated equally. There's a difference. They're your parents too, Garrett said, trying a different approach. You can't just abandon them because your feelings are hurt about the will. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm establishing boundaries after decades of one-sided relationships. There's a difference there too. The tension escalated until Graham kicked a trash can, creating enough commotion that my assistant called security. As they were escorted from the building, Garrett turned back. This isn't over, Isaac. They need you whether you like it or not. That evening, an email arrived from Garrett, with attachments, bank statements, mortgage documents, medical bills. The financial disaster was even worse than they described. My parents had leveraged everything to support the twins' failures and maintain appearances. Their retirement fund was depleted. The house had barely any equity left. Dad's business was operating in the red. I stayed up most of the night reviewing the documents, not because I planned to swoop in and rescue them, but because I needed to understand the full picture. The truth was sobering. My parents had enabled the twins for so long that they'd endangered their own financial security, and now they expected me to bail out all 4 of them indefinitely. As dawn broke over the city skyline, I made a decision. I wouldn't respond to the emotional manipulation, but I also wouldn't let my parents become homeless. I would help them find a sustainable solution that didn't involve me becoming their permanent financial support. They needed to face reality, and so did the twins. I just didn't realize how quickly that reality would come knocking on their door. 3 weeks after the infamous dinner, my no-contact rule remained firmly in place despite escalating messages from my family. My parents' voicemails ranged from guilt-inducing to angry to pleading. The twins alternated between thinly veiled threats and awkward attempts at reconciliation. I archived their emails without reading them and sent calls to voicemail. Then came an unexpected call from Linda Wilson, my parents' next-door neighbor, for 20 years. "Isaac, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. Your mother gave me your number years ago for emergencies." Her voice sounded hesitant. "I'm concerned about your parents. There was a man in a suit leaving papers yesterday. Your father looked awful afterward. Your mother was crying on the porch for hours." "What kind of papers?" I asked, though I had suspicions. I couldn't say for certain, but there was a bank logo on the envelope. Raymond has been telling Harold that business is slow, but it seemed more serious than that. I thanked her for the information, promising to check on the situation. After hanging up, I contacted a former client who worked in real estate financing. "Can you check if there are any foreclosure proceedings on this address?" I gave him my parents' information. He called back within the hour. "First notice of default was filed last week. They missed 3 mortgage payments. Bank is initiating foreclosure proceedings." So, it had already begun. The financial house of cards was collapsing faster than I'd anticipated. That evening, my father left a voicemail that sounded different from his previous messages. His voice lacked the usual authoritative tone, instead sounding tired and defeated. "Isaac, I know you're angry. We might have made a mistake with how we handled things at dinner. Could we talk person to person, not about money? Things are complicated right now." Before I could decide whether to respond, my phone rang again. This time, it was the security desk in my building's lobby. "Mr. Harrington, there's an Eleanor Harrington here, insisting she's your mother. She seems quite distressed. Should we send her up or ask her to leave?" My mother had never visited my condo before. She'd claimed downtown traffic was too stressful. For her to show up unannounced meant things had truly reached a breaking point. "Send her up," I said, after a moment's hesitation. The elevator ride must have given her time to compose herself. When I opened my door, she stood there with perfect posture, handbag clutched tightly, looking like she was arriving for a social call rather than a crisis intervention. Only the redness around her eyes betrayed her emotional state. "This is certainly impressive," she commented, taking in the open-concept living area, with its modern furniture and city views. "The boys said you'd done well, but I had no idea." "Would you like something to drink?" I offered, falling back on formalities to navigate the awkwardness. "Water would be fine." I led her to the kitchen, watching as she noted the high-end appliances and marble countertops. The difference between my living situation and their increasingly precarious one couldn't have been more stark. "Why are you here, Mom?" I asked, directly handing her a glass of water. She took a small sip before answering. "Your father and I are concerned. You've always been responsive to our calls, even when you were busy. 3 weeks of silence isn't like you. 3 weeks ago wasn't like you either," I countered. "Or maybe it was exactly like you, and I finally saw it clearly." Her lips tightened. "We were honest about our estate planning. We didn't realize you'd react so strongly." "It wasn't about the will, Mom. It was about what it represented. A lifetime of being treated as less important, less worthy of support and consideration than the twins." "That's not true," she protested, but her eyes dropped to her glass. "We love all our children equally. Love isn't just a feeling, it's demonstrated through actions. Your actions have always shown favoritism." She began to tear up, which would normally have been my cue to backpedal to comfort her and take responsibility for her emotions. This time I remained silent, letting her sit with the uncomfortable truth. "Things are bad, Isaac," she finally admitted, voice breaking. "The bank is taking the house. Your father's having chest pains from the stress. The doctor says his blood pressure is dangerously high. The business is failing. We have nowhere to turn." "What about the twins? Shouldn't they be helping, since they'll inherit everything?" She looked away. "They're in no position to help. Graham still hasn't found steady work. Garrett's wife is expecting, and they're barely making rent. So once again it falls to me," I observed. "The son you've written out of your will." "We can change the will," she offered quickly, revealing her true motivation. "Split everything 3 ways like it should have been." "It's not about the will anymore, Mom. It's about recognizing patterns and breaking them. You and Dad created this situation by enabling the twins and neglecting me. We all need to find a healthier way forward." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Please, Isaac. I don't know what to do. Your father won't eat. He sits in his office staring at papers all day. I'm afraid he'll have a heart attack." Despite everything, seeing my mother's genuine distress moved me. I might be establishing boundaries, but I wasn't heartless. "I'll help with immediate medical needs," I conceded. "Give me Dad's doctor's information and the details about Mom's treatment. I'll arrange payments directly to the providers." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you, sweetheart. I knew you wouldn't let us down." "This is a one-time intervention," I clarified firmly, "not ongoing support. And it comes with conditions. We need family counseling to address the underlying issues. The twins need to take responsibility for their situations. Dad needs to consider downsizing the business or selling it." Her expression fell slightly, but she nodded. "We can discuss those things. The important part is that you're helping." As she left with a check for her medical treatment, I knew she'd heard my conditions but hadn't truly accepted them. She was focused on the immediate relief, not the long-term changes required. After she left, I contacted a business associate who specialized in troubled companies. He agreed to review my father's business confidentially and provide recommendations. Meanwhile, I researched options for seniors facing foreclosure and downsizing. The situation wasn't hopeless, but it required honest assessment and significant changes, things my family had avoided for years. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions. My father's construction company had been operating at a loss for nearly 5 years, kept afloat by loans and retirement fund withdrawals. The market had shifted towards sustainable building practices, but Dad had refused to adapt. Meanwhile, he'd kept multiple family members on payroll who rarely showed up, including both twins at various points. The picture was clear: my parents' financial ruin wasn't just bad luck or economic downturns. It was the direct result of enabling the twins while ignoring reality. Now they wanted me to continue that pattern indefinitely. It was time for a final reckoning. 1 week after my mother's surprise visit, I proposed a family meeting at a neutral location. I reserved a private dining room at Bellini's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, where the privacy would allow for honest conversation without public scenes. Everyone arrived punctually, a minor miracle given my family's track record. My father looked noticeably aged since our dinner 3 weeks earlier. His skin had a grayish tinge, and he moved stiffly. My mother maintained her usual impeccable appearance, but strain showed around her eyes. The twins seemed uncomfortable in the upscale setting, tugging at their collars and eyeing the multiple forks with suspicion. The server took our drink orders and left us with menus. An awkward silence fell over the table. "Thank you all for coming," I began formally. "I thought it was important. We discussed the situation as a family." "What situation exactly?" Graham asked defensively. "The one where you cut off Mom and Dad when they needed you most?" I ignored the bait. "The situation where this family's financial foundation is collapsing because of decades of unhealthy patterns." "Isaac helped with my medication," Mom interjected quickly. "He's being very generous." Dad cleared his throat. "About the dinner announcement. Perhaps we were hasty in how we presented things." It wasn't quite an apology, but from my father, it represented significant concession. "I've consulted with financial advisors about your situation," I continued. "Based on the documents Garrett sent, bankruptcy might be your best option at this point." "Bankruptcy?" Dad looked horrified. "I've never failed to pay a debt in my life." "There's a first time for everything," I replied evenly. "The business is unsustainable. The house has almost no equity. Your retirement funds are depleted. Those are facts, not judgments." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "We never thought it would come to this." "What about the twins? Why haven't they contributed financially, given they stand to inherit everything?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. The twins studied their water glasses intently. "They've had their own challenges," Mom said defensively. "They've never held steady jobs," I countered. "They've moved from venture to venture, failure to failure, always with your financial safety net beneath them." "That's not fair," Garrett protested weakly. "It's entirely fair." "Graham, When was the last time you held a job for more than 6 months? Garrett, how many businesses have you started and abandoned, and how much of our parents' money went into each failure? Dad intervened before they could respond. The past is the past. We need solutions now. Solutions require honesty. We can't solve problems we won't acknowledge. Mom twisted her napkin in her lap. Perhaps I've been overprotective of the boys. They reminded me so much of my brother who died young. I wanted to give them every advantage. This was news to me. Your brother. You've never mentioned him before. Thomas, she said softly. My twin. He died when we were 16. Car accident. The twins were like having a piece of him back. Suddenly many things made more sense. Her excessive attention to the twins. The fierce protection. The blind eye to their failings. Dad added his own confession. I used your success to cover my shame about the twins. At the club, at business events. My son, the tech entrepreneur, made me sound like a successful father when I was watching the boys flounder. The honesty was unexpected and disarming. For the first time, my parents were acknowledging the complex emotional currents beneath our family dynamic. I took a deep breath and delivered the speech I'd rehearsed countless times in my mind. For my entire life, I've been treated as an afterthought in this family. I worked through college while the twins got full rides. I built my company with zero support, while you bailed them out of every failed venture. I achieved financial success through my own efforts, then used that success to help you secretly because I knew your pride wouldn't allow you to accept help openly. No one interrupted, as I continued. The dinner announcement wasn't surprising because of the inheritance itself. I don't need or want your money. It was shocking, because it so blatantly formalized what I've always known but tried to deny in this family. I will never be equal to Graham and Garrett. Mom was openly crying now. Dad stared at his hands. The twins looked genuinely uncomfortable. But despite everything, you're still my family. I don't want to see you homeless or without medical care, so I'm willing to help with conditions. All 4 heads snapped up at this. What conditions? Dad asked cautiously. First, financial boundaries. I'll help you transition to a sustainable situation, but I won't be an unlimited source of funds. That means downsizing the house, restructuring or selling the business, and living within realistic means. Dad nodded reluctantly. Second, the twins need to contribute, not necessarily financially, but through consistent effort towards self-sufficiency. No more bailouts for ventures doomed to fail. No more enabling gambling or other destructive behaviors. Graham looked like he might object, but remained silent. Third, we all attend family therapy to address the underlying dynamics that got us here. Not one session, not a month. Consistent, committed work with a professional. Therapy. Dad scoffed. Harrington men don't need head doctors. This condition is non-negotiable, I stated firmly. Without addressing the emotional patterns, financial help is just a temporary bandage on a deeper wound. Mom placed her hand on Dad's arm. Raymond, we should consider it. For the family. After a long moment, Dad nodded. Fine, if that's what it takes. The twins exchanged glances. Garrett spoke first. I've been talking with a contractor friend about apprenticing, learning an actual trade instead of chasing quick money. I'm 6 months sober from gambling, Graham added quietly. Working with a sponsor. It's not easy, but I'm trying. These small signs of personal responsibility were more than I'd seen from either brother in years. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. One more thing, I added. The will should be changed to equal distribution among all 3 children regardless of financial need. Not because I want the money, but because it represents equal standing in this family. Mom nodded immediately. We'll call the lawyer tomorrow. The rest of the dinner passed with detailed discussion of next steps. I outlined a transition plan my financial advisor had helped create. The relief on my parents' faces was palpable when they realized there was a path forward, even if it required significant changes. As we prepared to leave, Dad pulled me aside. I've never been good at saying this, but I'm proud of you, son. Not just for the money or success, but for the man you've become. Despite our failings as parents, it was the most genuine thing he'd ever said to me. I nodded, not trusting my voice in that moment. The twins approached next. We've been awful brothers, Garrett admitted. Taking without giving. We didn't see it until recently. We've got a lot to make up for, Graham added, if you'll give us the chance. I didn't make promises I wasn't sure I could keep. Let's take it one step at a time. Actions matter more than words at this point. As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't expected: cautious hope. Not naive optimism that everything would magically improve, but realistic hope that with professional help and genuine effort, we might build something healthier than what came before. The journey would be long and undoubtedly difficult. Old patterns don't disappear overnight. But for the first time in my life, I felt seen by my family. Not as a bank account or a bragging right, but as a full, equal member worthy of respect. It was a beginning. 6 months after that pivotal family meeting, we sat in Dr. Bennett's office for our weekly therapy session. The beige walls and comfortable chairs had become familiar territory for all of us. What began as awkward, resistant sessions had gradually evolved into meaningful work. The early weeks were rough. Mom cried constantly. Dad sat with arms crossed, participating minimally. The twins fluctuated between defensive and overly apologetic. I maintained emotional distance, skeptical that anything would actually change. Dr. Bennett was exactly what our family needed: compassionate, but unwavering in her commitment to truth. She called out deflections, challenged excuses, and created a space where honest communication could finally happen. Raymond. She addressed my father during one breakthrough session. When you say, "That's just how fathers were in my day," you're avoiding responsibility for the choices you made. Did your father favor some children over others? Dad shifted uncomfortably. Number. He was tough on all of us equally. So this pattern started with you and Eleanor, not with previous generations. That simple observation opened floodgates of reflection about how and why the favoritism developed. Mom's unresolved grief over her twin brother. Dad's unconscious resentment that I didn't follow him into construction. The twins' learning difficulties that triggered Mom's protective instincts. Understanding didn't erase the decades of hurt, but it provided context that made forgiveness possible. Meanwhile, practical changes moved forward. My parents sold their 4-bedroom colonial and downsized to a comfortable 2-bedroom condo in a 55-plus community. The process was emotional, but ultimately liberating. Mom discovered she enjoyed having less space to maintain and more social activities with neighbors. Dad made the difficult decision to sell his construction business to a former employee who had the energy and vision to modernize operations. He stayed on as a consultant 3 days a week, which provided structure without the stress of full responsibility. His health improved dramatically once the financial pressure lifted. The twins surprised everyone with their commitment to change. Garrett completed his contractor apprenticeship and secured steady work with a reputable firm. Graham maintained his gambling sobriety and found employment as an office manager for a dental practice. Both moved to more affordable apartments and stopped asking our parents for money. Most significantly, my parents formally changed their will to split everything equally among the 3 children. The document itself meant little financially. After downsizing and settling debts, their estate was modest. But the symbolism represented a profound shift in family dynamics. My relationship with my brothers slowly transformed from resentment to cautious connection. We weren't best friends, but we established a foundation of mutual respect that had never existed before. Garrett invited me to his daughter's christening. Graham asked for advice about investing his first significant savings. Small steps toward normal brotherhood. One unexpected development came when Dad suggested we work on a project together. He'd always been handy, and I had purchased a vintage wooden boat that needed restoration. Every Saturday for 3 months, we met at the marina, sanding, varnishing, and gradually rebuilding both the boat and our relationship. "I should have done things like this with you when you were young," he admitted one afternoon as we worked side by side. "I was so focused on the twins' needs that I missed connecting with you." "We're doing it now," I replied. "That counts for something." The holiday season brought the first family gathering that felt genuine rather than obligatory. We met at my condo, everyone contributing dishes to the meal. Conversation flowed naturally, without the underlying tension that had characterized family events for decades. When the twins announced they were organizing a summer fishing trip and wanted me to join it felt like a genuine invitation rather than an obligation. Throughout this healing process, I reflected deeply on the lessons learned from our family crisis. Self-worth can't come from others' validation. I had spent years trying to earn my parents' approval through achievement, only to discover that external validation will never fill internal emptiness. True self-worth comes from within. Money reveals character, it doesn't create it. Financial pressure didn't make my family dysfunctional. It merely exposed existing dysfunctions. Similarly, my financial success didn't create my resilience and determination. It resulted from those qualities. There's a critical difference between helping and enabling. My anonymous financial support had temporarily solved practical problems while allowing unhealthy patterns to continue. Real help sometimes means allowing natural consequences while providing emotional support through difficulties. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for healthy relationships. By establishing clear financial and emotional boundaries, I actually created the opportunity for authentic connection based on mutual respect rather than dependence. Forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. I could forgive my parents' and brothers' past actions without pretending they never happened. Forgiveness was about freeing myself from resentment, not giving others a blank slate. As my company continued growing, I found myself approaching business with renewed clarity and purpose. We expanded into new markets, launched a foundation supporting tech education for underprivileged youth, and created a work environment that valued authenticity and balanced ambition with compassion. On a personal level, I began dating Jessica, a children's book illustrator I met through a mutual friend. Unlike previous relationships where I'd hidden my family complications, I was open about our history and ongoing healing process. Her own experiences with a blended family gave her unique understanding, and she attended several family events with genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. The journey wasn't perfect. We still had difficult moments in therapy. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced during stress. The twins sometimes slipped into expecting bailouts. Mom still occasionally showed favoritism. But the difference was awareness. We recognized unhealthy patterns quickly and addressed them directly instead of maintaining the polite fiction that everything was fine. One evening, walking along the waterfront with Jessica, I reflected on how dramatically life had changed since that devastating dinner announcement. "You know what's strange," I said. "If my parents hadn't explicitly excluded me from their will, none of this healing might have happened. That painful moment forced everything into the open." "Sometimes the worst moments create the best opportunities for growth," she replied, squeezing my hand. She was right. The formal acknowledgement of my unequal status had been incredibly painful, but it had also been the catalyst for transformation. By standing firm in my worth and requiring change, rather than enabling dysfunction, I had helped create the possibility of authentic family relationships. That dinner invitation hadn't been the end of our family story. It had been the beginning of a new, healthier chapter. Not because I had rescued everyone financially, but because I had refused to continue participating in patterns that diminished all of us. So, if you're facing similar family dynamics or painful revelations, remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's often the first step toward healing for everyone involved. The path forward may be difficult, but the authentic connections on the other side are worth the journey. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing firm in their worth is both necessary and powerful. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the relationships that challenge us most also offer the greatest opportunities for growth.